What if the version of you've been chasing is actually the one you've been trying to return to all along? The one before the noise, before the burnout, before you started shrinking to fit a life that never really fit you. This isn't about starting over. It's about returning. Returning to your soul, returning to your truth, the version of you that has always been meant to be. Each week, we're going to offer up real stories, hard-earned wisdom, and practical tools from powerful returns to help you reconnect with who you are and why you're here. I'm your host, Brian White, and this is The Return Project. In today's episode, we get to sit down with Julee Sung. She's at the place of a corporate career that she had climbed the ladder, she had built her identity around. And what do you do when your identity gets stripped away? That's what Julee Sung found herself in, and she's here to share her story of rediscovering herself, returning to what she wanted to be after, like so many of us, being laid off in the pandemic from what she thought was and had created into her identity to finding out what was next. So Julee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Julee, I would love for you to just start us off right diving deep into your story of where it all began. As we kind of spoke earlier, you had built your identity a bit around a corporate career that you've been building.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny because when I was in school, I was a music major. I was going to go into music education and be in academia for the rest of my life. That was my plan. I started grad school, started teaching, loved teaching, hated academia. Just was not my cup of tea. I have tremendous respect for the academics out there. It just wasn't a good fit for me. So I thought, I don't even know what I'm doing in grad school and pursuing this master's degree anymore. Let me drop out for just a year, go get a job, make some money, and then figure out what I want to do. I dove into the corporate world from there, starting out as an assistant, and for whatever reason took to it like duck to water, basically. And from there, never went back to school, kept working, getting interesting projects and assignments, then the next role, then the next company. And I just kept going down this corporate train track. And I reached a point where I started to get really good at what I was doing. So I was getting promoted and riding that sort of tidal wave of, that ego boost every time you get, kudos or a good performance review or something. So I was kind of chasing the gold stars for a very, very long time and didn't really realize that I was leading with my ego the whole time. I wasn't really fulfilled. I don't even know if I was motivated beyond just the external validation that the corporate world can give you. And I just became this very type A, just competitive, like just go get it kind of personality, which actually isn't really who I am, but that's who I became. And over the years, as I got more and more quote unquote successful in the corporate world, I more and more lost touch with my personal life. As you correctly pointed out, my entire identity became my job. I got to a point where I would meet friends for, drinks or dinner or coffee or something, and they'd say, "Hey, what's new? What's going on?" And I had nothing really to share other than work, which, by the way, nobody was interested in hearing about. And this went on for decades. So I was getting really good at being the corporate maven. I followed my boss at the time to a couple of different companies and found myself in 2020 at my highest level position. I was, a direct line to the chief revenue officer. So I was like C-level -1. I had budget, I had team, I had resources, I had title, I had paycheck, all these things. And I was working, easily 12 hours a day, maybe more. I had anything else going on. Pandemic hit. My boss is out of the company. I am now given a 6-month window of, hey, you could find something internally in 6 months or, you're on the list. It was actually very generous that they gave me 6 months. And the funny thing is they said, hey, we really like you at this company. I think there are people that, may have headcount, may have budget. You should talk to them, and find another internal position. And I said, okay, yeah, no, that's a great idea. And I did nothing, Brian. I didn't send one email. I didn't make one phone call. And I kept thinking every day, I'm like, I should do that. I should reach out. I should network either internally or externally. It's not like I'm a trust fund baby. So I definitely needed to work to get my livelihood maintained. But what I didn't realize at the time was that was true burnout, where I was just in this really weird depressed state because I was on the list. I wasn't working on projects. I was just kind of on the slow wrap up everything you're working on kind of path. And I thought, well, if I don't have this, am I now going to go just find somebody else and find another job and just dive back into it or not? And I had just had this feeling like, hey, maybe this is my one opportunity to do something different. Maybe I'm not a badged employee anymore, and I was starting to read the tea leaves. And if we all remember back to the pandemic, which seems like a long time ago, but it actually wasn't that long ago, a lot of consulting gigs were starting to pop up because people and companies needed the work done, but they weren't sure about hiring people because they didn't know what was happening in the world, literally. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go be a consultant. And I did. And the funny thing is, you think in this story, the layoff is the bottom. It's actually not. What was actually the bottom for me was I dove into consulting and I had built a strong enough professional network over the years where I could reach out to people and I could get gigs right away. And I was actually making more money. My ego was even bigger than before because I was like, I'm doing my own thing. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm doing all this. And I was just repeating the grind. It was not under a corporate umbrella, but I was doing the exact same thing. I was working these crazy days. I was taking on really stressful clients. I mean, quite frankly, clients that other people probably didn't want to work with. And I was getting so burned out to the point where I just wasn't sleeping. I had no appetite or motivation for anything. And that's when I realized very slowly, by the way, very, very slowly, that maybe something's wrong. Okay, it took me over 25 years to actually realize that I was down the wrong path, but here I am. And I started to think, what do I do? What changes do I make to get myself a little bit more just stable? I just felt really unstable. Every day felt like just one big stress ball. And I never wanted to be the type of person that hated Mondays, like, oh, I hate Mondays. Sunday nights are so anxious. But I literally was becoming that person. And I thought, this is not right. I'm ending up with high blood pressure and ulcer, some combination of, bad factors. And this is when I actually started working with a coach myself. Got a lot of value in it. And I thought, hey, maybe this whole time I just didn't find a purpose behind the work I was doing. And maybe if I can get into consulting companies that I like and people that I really respect and want to learn from, do some coaching myself, go study it, get certified and start helping people, maybe that'll not alleviate stress necessarily, but give me a purpose to my day in this sort of context of service that makes the hard work really worthwhile. And so for me, that was the kind of return to myself, if you will, in terms of my values. I wasn't living my company's core values. I was living my core values. And I say this like I have it all figured out now, which I totally don't. I'm still kind of learning and growing every day and, new challenges come and all that. But, that's been my journey up to this point. And a lot of lessons learned that I'd love to share with others, and hopefully they find it valuable for them.
I would love for us to start a little bit at the beginning there, as you found yourself with this corporate job that you were climbing. Did you find yourself in a space ever that you weren't matching your morals and values that you would usually stand for in what you were outwardly living?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, not to, kind of the Hollywood drama of like something really bad was going on and, I was complicit in something that was, whatever. But I definitely felt like, hey, this high intensity, high competition, eat or be eaten kind of environment because I was in high tech. I was largely in sales. I was like, this is not actually what I want. There are people who are very good at it and who are, who find fulfillment and satisfaction and motivation around it. And kudos to them, because you do need sales to keep revenue coming in, and revenue coming in for a company means people are employed, and all that's good stuff, right? So this is not to disparage anyone who are a good fit for that. That just was not a good fit for me. And the negativity around you either meet your number or you don't, you're either winning or you're losing. For me, I believe in gray. I live in the grayscale. I'm not a black and white person, but I was living in a very black and white world where you are ranked, you're making your number, you're achieving or you're not achieving. And that was definitely antithesis to who I was and who I am. So yeah, absolutely. I definitely relate to that question.
When you were on the outside world, outside of these corporate hours, and you were saying you would go for dinner or out with friends and they would ask if there was anything new, did you find that living in that corporate mindset affected your relationships, the way that you were able to connect with people on the outside world, outside of corporate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. On two really important levels. Number one, I've made reference to the giant ego that I had put out there in the world for a very long time, living this corporate maven life. And there was definitely a part of me that was like, it's okay. I don't need it. I have my career. I'm just all in on my career. And that's my baby. That's my fulfillment. That's who I am. And this is just what I'm going to do just for the next couple of years. By the way, that next couple of years were a couple of decades, but that's how you sort of rationalize to yourself. So I think that I'm fine. I'm totally fine. I don't need anything else. I have this, and this is I'm driven. I'm ambitious to do this. Pat, 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 hey, you're doing okay. Then the other level was the less I could relate to people, of course, because I wasn't doing anything as a person outside of work. So there was nothing that I could relate to others around, maybe superficially, like pop culture stuff. But even there, I couldn't really go too deep. The more I became disconnected with that, the more I became disconnected with myself, because I think we all need those relationships socially, whether they're deep, meaningful relationships or even, fun, casual relationships. You need that relativity with other humans to keep yourself fulfilled and whole. And because I didn't have that, there definitely was a lack in sort of my energy level. I was out of kilter. I was out of balance. So now looking back on that time, it reminds me to be really grateful for the personal connections that I do have that stuck around, if you will, and new ones that I've made since, and not take it for granted. And, just know that, hey, the way I was showing up for work, like 120%, if I had split that energy even a little bit to share with the people around me, my life would have been very different and a lot richer, I think, during those days.
This is something that I have struggled with, and it's a very, very fascinating lesson, I think. Did you ever find the point where you were in a space where, as you just said, you could show up for your job at 120%, but you weren't showing up for yourself at 120%?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. As much as I was like, I'm awesome, I'm the best, right? Like you just have this weird mantra in your head to just keep going in that kind of corporate environment, at least the kind of corporate culture I was in. But deep down, that, wow, what self-worth do I have? Like what self-value am I giving myself? Because I'm not paying any attention to my needs. I was not exercising. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't sleeping right, all these things. And I was sacrificing parts of myself for what though? Chasing after something that was this elusive and ultimately for me, not as important kind of thing. And I thought I was putting myself first by going all in on this, professional track. But actually I was putting myself last. I was putting all my company stuff first. For sure. Sleep could wait. This report had to get done. That spreadsheet had to be checked, right? But for me, I was like, no, my needs definitely were pushed aside. I just didn't have the self-awareness at the time to realize that that's what I was doing.
So let's roll forward here to the point where the pandemic's come in. You've been told that you've got 60 days. You've now gone into this consulting area. And how were you feeling at that point? Was there any ounce of fear, or what was the feeling around you had to figure it out and you were building this ego, but you were kind of in a space where it wasn't feeling right?
Yeah, that's it. For a while in the beginning, of course, there's tremendous fear. And the way I dealt with my fear and insecurity and all that, it's FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, doubt. The way I dealt with it was just pushing my ego forward. Like, nope, just walk in, like own the pitch, win the gig, like do all this. But there was always fear every day because it's funny. People think a badged employee is such a safe job. And of course it's not, anymore. It hasn't been for probably a long time. But I thought, hey, if a badged employee job is not safe, what about a consulting job? I could wake up tomorrow and they could be like, oh, we're out of money. We're out of time. We're out of resources. I'm going to cancel this contract early. Like any one of those things can happen. So I would wake up literally just like with every intent and focus on making sure that that didn't happen, like I could control it, which of course you can't. So I had a tremendous amount of fear, a tremendous amount of nervous anxiety, energy. And the way I dealt with it was just grinding it out harder, right? Just grind it out. But I definitely had fear. And I just thought, oh, the way to deal with fear is you just push through it, right? You just keep going and push through it, do the work. And I think that ultimately I started out burnt out, and then I really got burnt out, just kind of heading down that path.
What was the pivotal moment that you realized I can't do this anymore? Was there a moment or a feeling where you hit your wall, your rock bottom, and you went, this just can't go on?
Yeah, there were a couple of incidents kind of back to back. I was working with a handful of clients and I was doing a lot of operational strategy, this kind of stuff that they hire consultants for because, a lot of times it's really not a full-time job. They just need you for, this, we need to launch this initiative. We need to, stand up this business unit or what have you. And I had two clients who were extremely difficult, but in different ways, different size companies. One just got acquired at that time and they said, hey, we'd love for you to come in and do all the strategy and do all this planning and stuff. Great. Go in there, do this. And I sat there and I looked around the room at these folks and I realized I'm like, they're never going to do this. They just sold their company. They're a bunch of partners. They're sitting there and they're feeling good. They're not going to implement anything that has meaningful change for this company because they just sold. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, why did I spend 3 sleepless nights putting this presentation together for a bunch of people who are just checking the box and going through the motions? They have zero plan to really commit and execute. They're just in it for the golden handcuffs and couple years later and they're just on their boat somewhere in Antigua or whatever, and I just had this weird sense of I just wasted my time. Like I literally wasted my time for something that doesn't mean anything. And it was so depressing. It was like so deflating, so that was one very memorable incident where I realized I'm like, my work doesn't actually mean anything here. They don't care. I could have had solid gold bars, built around, and that's probably the only thing they would have paid attention to. And then, I think a week later, my other extremely difficult client, came to me and said, hey, we're going to go through a bunch of layoffs, of course, because the layoff, rule continued. And they just had such an impersonal take to the layoffs. Like, here's the list of names. Just give us a template, and, just make sure this package looks good. And can you just double check with legal to make sure we don't get sued, is basically like, and just watching them treat these people and looking at this list. And some of them had been there for years, and I'm like, and it was just employee number, name, tenure, package level. And I thought, this isn't right. Like, there's a pandemic going on. The world is crumbling down, and you can't treat people this way. You can't treat them like cattle. You're just going to herd them over to the next, to the next fence or something. And so those two things back to back really gave me that, there are great people out there, great leaders and organizations out there. I'm not working with them. And I don't know if I will ever work with them, out there or not. But I did realize that the work I was doing for these folks was just not meaningful and, wasn't helping anyone. And that's when I really thought, I need to figure out a different client list. I need to figure out a different line of work, something where I don't feel like, oh, I just wasted my time. Like, yeah, thanks for paying me. But ultimately, I don't want to just be like a coin operated machine. I wanted to do something different.
Would you say that the, what do I want to call it? The concept, idea that in the corporate world and business world, that, as you were just talking about, people are just a number, and that how they say, if you died tomorrow, you'll be replaced just as fast. Is that a real true saying? Like, I feel like a lot of the time, what I hear coming from the corporate and business world is that that's how they treat you. If you died tomorrow, they would just replace you.
It's hard, and I think it depends on the company culture largely. I do think there's a tendency for companies in the private sector, especially, where you are rewarded for certain behaviors as you climb the corporate ladder. You are rewarded for, again, bringing in the money, saving costs. There are all these behaviors that you're rewarded for. By the time you reach the top, that's how you've been trained. You haven't been rewarded for, hey, you really took great care of your people. You've been rewarded for, you helped grow this company and brought in a bunch of money. So I think when you have leadership who have been trained in that way, it's very hard then to pull back and say, everything that made me successful to this day, I'm going to actually let that go aside for a second and pay attention to this other stuff, like people, change management, human to human connections, and what does it mean to really build a culture that is people centric. You weren't rewarded for that before, so what is going to incent you to do that now, when probably the board is on your shoulder, like, hey, what's our earnings going to look like next quarter? Hey, I need everyone to cut 20% of costs year over year. That pressure, I think, dissuades a lot of leadership to really pay attention to people in the way that they need to. I think that's why you have this like quiet quitting and people seeking, different smaller organizations maybe where they don't feel like they're just a badge number.
Coming out of things like the pandemic in the last handful of years, have you seen any change in the culture of some businesses and the corporate world at all, leaning towards more people connection and building a better culture than what we used to have?
I think so. I think, during the pandemic times, it was, of course, the pandemic, which just ruled our lives, every single one of us for a while. But there was also, the Black Lives Matter march. There were all these other things going on in the world at the same time where it just made us reevaluate so many things. And I think hopefully that was a wake-up call for corporations at the upper echelon of these, multi-gajillion-dollar companies. You still hear of the culture being very like, oh, we're different, but you're not, because you're kind of operating the same way. But you do see this rise of younger leaders who are taking the helm now more and more, saying, hey, I grew up under that generation. I don't want that for myself. So I am incredibly optimistic that there is change afoot. I do know that the bigger the corporation, the harder it is to turn the tide. You can't turn the Titanic on a dime. Like, it just doesn't happen that way. But I think it's going to take a lot of the changing of the guards for true change to happen. I see that happening, and I hope they stay that way, because the other thing I see is a lot of these smaller and mid-sized organizations are being swallowed up by bigger companies. So what you hope is that that culture that is being bought can permeate through the bigger enterprise and not the other way around, right? And time will tell, but I do hope that with the new generation of leaders combined with, more and more companies being truly people aware and people centric, that those things have a convergence and some synergy.
Touch base about how you were speaking at the time you had found your ego had become very inflated.
Yeah.
Did you ever hit a point where maybe the ego got a little too inflated or you realized that there might be an issue with ego versus what was creating fulfillment and joy in your life?
Absolutely. And that's what my entire book is about, by the way, because my whole book is basically a cautionary tale of all my embarrassing experiences and what not to do, pulling out those experiences and those lessons learned and sort of knitting it together in this book format. I realized that it was so ego, and the flip side is insecurity driven. So times when I was really insensitive to other teammates, for example, not giving them the spotlight and not being gracious with that space, where there just wasn't enough oxygen in the room other than for me, and I did get, some hard lessons. But the thing is, I would learn the lesson, reflect on it, feel bad about it, and then go right back to where I was eventually, because that gravitational pull of bad habits is very, very magnetic. But yeah, there were definitely times when I was, turned down for certain positions, for example, because they said, your leadership skills aren't there yet. I didn't know what that meant, but that's exactly what they meant, was it's too much about you and not enough about other people and, giving the space for your team to grow and things like that. It makes a lot more sense now that I'm facing it and owning up to it and really reflecting on it more honestly. At the time, I was like, okay, well, yeah, their loss, you know what I mean? So I definitely had a bad attitude about it, most of the time. But yeah, I mean, there definitely were lessons that I didn't digest enough at the time, but I certainly do now.
Rolling forward here again, after you've found your space of this might need to change and you're taking those steps forward and you're starting to integrate some of those new lessons and the habits, how did you start to find a different feeling in yourself, I would say? Did you start to notice that when you made these transitions and started to alter some of the behaviors or down coming from the ego styles, that it really made a shift in yourself?
It did, but it wasn't instantaneous. So to be quite frank, it's not like, oh, in my mind, I made up these decisions, right? Like I'm not going to lead with ego. I'm working with a coach who's like, hey, you got to check yourself. Like seriously, like this is kind of out of control, and learning those techniques and tactics and tools to like stay grounded and stay centered and don't be the hot air balloon, right? That kind of rises up in the air. But because all that was learned behavior for so many years, to change that behavior and act a different way, behave a different way, it takes a lot of work and a lot of practice. So for me, it actually felt very uncomfortable for, the early part of that growth journey, where I was like, this doesn't feel right. Of course not. It's like, if you're eating junk food for 20 years and then someone puts a salad in front of you, guess what? The salad's not going to taste as good. You know what I mean? Like, I want my pizza. I want my burger. And that's really where I was. So even though that was the right way, it didn't feel right. It felt awkward, uncomfortable. Am I doing this? Why am I doing it? Am I doing it just because someone tells me to, or I read a book and they said, do it this way? So a lot of that doubt was there in the early days, and you have to push through it, have faith. If you have a mentor or someone you trust, or even a tight social circle that you can rely on to say like, hey, just be honest with me. That's great to have those resources because it's hard to do it alone. But yeah, it took a while for me to be like, oh no, eating healthy is good. Like, oh, moving my body is a really good thing. I mean, in the early days, it won't feel like that.
Absolutely, it doesn't.
No, but if it feels uncomfortable, you might be on the right track.
Here's the one that catches everybody, though, is consistency. How did you find yourself in a space of being able to stay on track with how you wanted to live? How did you find yourself being able to be consistent and not falling back into those bad habits and letting your ego get inflated, or just going back to what you knew was easy and finding another big corporate job?
Yeah. Starting with the corporate job one first, I actually don't, because I wasn't missing that environment, I wasn't tempted by it. I did have some people over the last few years reach out and say, hey, I know you're doing all this work. We're hiring here at these big companies at Oracle, Salesforce, you name it, right? I mean, because I have those connections in a lot of those companies. And I thought, you get tempted for a second. Maybe it would be so great to have like a K plan. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it'd be so great to have like a snack room and, all these things. And you just fantasize about that. And then I pictured myself going through the whole process, signing up, getting a badge, badging in and out, doing that daily grind. And I was like, that's just not for me. I can't do it. And again, it's not to say it's bad for everyone. It just wasn't good for me because of my tendencies of all the bad behaviors that brought out for me. Being consistent is really hard. It's a struggle every day. It's like the people who say, I'm addicted to fitness, to working out. I go to the gym every day. They're the anomalies, okay, people? Like normal people. I work out every week, 6 days a week. And every morning I'm like, I don't want to go exercise. Maybe I have a headache. Maybe my knee hurts. Maybe I had that extra glass of wine last night. I don't want to go, but you go. And a lot of it's just what helped me was putting a routine in place. And if you fall off the wagon 1 day, 2 day, that's okay. All right. Just get back on it. And it was just building up those muscles and doing those, repeated tasks and having a routine and a schedule was really, really important for me so that even if I fell off that consistency wagon, I knew I fell off, because I knew what I was supposed to be doing. It was there. It was on my calendar. So it's just about doing it every day and sometimes forcing yourself to do it. And I think it never is easy to stay on the right path. It's always easier to stay on the wrong, cushy, soft, fun, fluffy path. But obviously it's worth it, right? And you just have to find some techniques and tactics that work for you. For me, it was my calendar and having things just documented in there because that was the habit that I had built over so many years.
My calendar. I'm not gonna lie, everything goes on my calendar.
Yeah.
My calendar is multicolor coded and times. And that's my greatest tool. I know that not everybody can go to a calendar. For myself, like you were just talking about, I love it because it's visual. It's putting a pen to something, whether it's paper or the magnetic calendar, that I can see, feel, and know exactly where I need to be, when I need to be, and what I want to get done.
Yep.
The area that you were talking about a little bit before is your book. I would love to know more about your book and how did that come about? Where did you find yourself in a space of when you decided I'm going to write a book?
I know. It's the craziest thing. I think some people are like, oh, I know I'm a writer. I know I have a book in me. I was never that person. I was like, yeah, I can write good English in an email or something. I can write an essay, but that's it. Like I never thought I'd write a book. What happened was my partner's older daughter at the time, this is about a year plus ago, she had recently graduated college and she was interviewing for her first corporate job, joining the big back corporate world as a young lady, much the way I did back when I was her age. And she asked me for some book recommendations. So I said, oh yeah, there are great resources out there. And there are, but a lot of books I found were very academic. It was very 2010 data states, blah, 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 percentage of whatever. And I'm like, she's not looking for this book. She's looking for someone who's been there, done that, like an older, wiser friend advice kind of book. And I didn't see a lot of that out there, especially for young women. And I thought, I have stories and experiences. Maybe I should, I don't know, start a blog or something. And then it just was like, okay, who am I kidding? I'm not ever going to be consistent enough to do a blog, but maybe I could get some thoughts down on paper. And I was kind of talking about this idea with my coach, and she has a book out. So she introduced me to her publisher, and that was it. So they were like, no, there's definitely a book here. It's really like a guidebook for early stage professionals. And that's what I ended up writing. It was about a year-long process. So it's not like I just woke up and, jotted away and all of a sudden there was a book. There was a lot of love and care and effort and a lot of fear and uncertainty again as well. But yeah, it's been a really rewarding journey, and hopefully it won't be my last book, but definitely is my first book.
If you want to share the name of your book with our audience here, then maybe they can go find it.
Yeah, that would be great. It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and bookshop.org. It's called Thrive and Shine.
I always have to chuckle because everyone that I've ever talked to that has written a book, we all kind of say the same things. It was never one of those, we grew up and said we were going to be a writer. I would say 90% of the people that I've talked to that have now become authors and written books just really one day woke up and went, I should write about this, or I know this and it would help somebody. And it has turned into incredible pieces of work.
Yes, that's exactly right. There was a moment during the writing process when I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't even know if I'm doing a good job. And my publisher said, hey, just remember why you're doing it. You're doing it as an act of service. You're doing it to help others. And that's what kept me going. And that's what made me go, okay, well, let me reread what I just wrote and see if I was just spewing out my story for the sake of my story, or if it's actually going to help somebody.
What's next on the plate for you? Do you have anything going forward? Any new projects on the go?
Yes. So I'm working more and more with nonprofit organizations, which is my passion. I have a couple clients now. They do a lot of community work. And through that, I'm meeting a lot of interesting people. I hope to be more of service and work with various nonprofits in both the healthcare sector as well as the community development. My second book, if I am fortunate enough to put another one together, will be more around those stories and bringing those everyday stories to life, because we hear a lot about the extreme success stories, right? Like, I was homeless and now I'm president of whatever company. Not those stories, but, everyday people who are just doing their best and keeping their families afloat and putting food on the table and teaching really great values to the circle around them. Those are the stories I'd love to highlight and showcase. So that's the idea for the next project. And more to come, I hope, soon.
Everything that you've learned up to this point, all the lessons you've taken in, the coaching that you've been able to do, if you could go back and look at your younger self who's just entering the workforce, what's the greatest bit of advice that you would tell yourself?
Yes, I would say first, you have to have love for yourself. And by love, I don't mean something, the ego-driven thing that we've talked about, but more put yourself first. If you can't be gracious with yourself, you will have no grace for others around you. And no man is an island, right? You can't do it alone. So make sure to give yourself plenty of room for love and grace, and don't white knuckle it. You don't have to. Not everything has to be life and death. In fact, very few things are. And you can get there with joy and with purpose. And it's okay if not every day is perfect, but you don't have to have a death grip on the day to make it. It
seems like a great place to bring our podcast full circle here. And at the end of every one of my conversations, I like to pose a really deep, powerful question. So, Julie, the question I throw out to everybody is, what is your true definition of truly living your best life?
Living your best life is waking up with joy and with love and with gratitude in your heart. What your day looks like can be very different, the type of job you have, the type of people you see, the type of work you do or conversations you have, all that are variables. What won't change is you being solidly who you are and pouring energy into yourself in the most positive way. If you have that, no matter what the day holds, you'll be just shining bright.
Beautifully said. So, Julie, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an incredible conversation. I know there's going to be somebody out there who relates to your story. They're going to be sitting in an office somewhere, working unhappily, trying to figure out what's next. So, Julie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been so amazing being here. I love the work you do and I love this podcast. So keep going. I'm excited to see what's next for you as well.
Thank you. Those words are appreciated. That's a wrap on today's episode. A heartfelt thank you to our guests for showing up with honesty, depth, and wisdom. And thank you for listening in. I hope something in this conversation stirred something in you, a memory, a reminder, or maybe even a return to a part of yourself that's been waiting. If you enjoyed this episode, can I ask a quick 30-second favor? Share it with someone you know, someone who might need to hear this message too. And don't forget to explore past episodes. There's so much more waiting for you there. Until next time, I'm your host, Brian White, and this is The Return Project.